Well, we've talked about attack. Let's move on now to the more thorny idea of defence in chess. And let's face it, nobody likes to defend, but we're all going to be called upon to do so when we play chess. We can't just dictate terms on the chessboard every single time. And invariably you're going to be up against a lot of opponents who are going to try and attack against you, and you will be forced on the defensive from time to time. So how best to conduct the defensive tasks? I can reduce it to this. Counterplay is the essence of defence. Okay, this is the main thing you have to understand. If you're defending, the worst fate in the world is to have to sit there and take it without any counterplay. You've got to be prepared to give it back. And the idea that counterplay distracts the opponent from his natural attacking scheme is central to the art of good defence. You don't just defend, you try and keep the enemy off balance by countering on some other area of the board. So counterplay is the essence of defence. Without counterplay, you're virtually dead in the water against a skilled opponent. Economy is also very important when you are defending. Defend with the minimum, attack with the maximum. The idea is that you reserve pieces for counterplay and you defend with as few pieces as you have to. The final thing is when you're trapped in a position where you haven't got a great deal to do, where you don't have any counterplay, you mustn't make things worse. You have to hold fast and wait for any opportunity that might arise. This is a concept which is alien to a lot of weaker players. They just don't have the patience to do this, to sit tight and wait and hope for better times. But in chess, if you are unfortunate to get a position like this, that's what you've got to do. Okay, well now I propose to illustrate each of these concepts in turn. And the first and most important thing I want to show you is that counterplay is the essence of defence. Okay, so I'm going to use a game from a recent match between Azerbaijan and the rest of the world. This was played in May 2009. We've got two of the finest players in the world currently playing this game. Playing white is Gashimov, he's graded 2730, and playing black is none other than Viswanathan Anand, who is the current World Chess Championship. And what you're going to see in this game is black pushed into what appears to be a very awkward defensive position early on. And Anand extricated himself by developing counterplay against Gashimov's position. And in the end, Anand completely takes over and wins the game almost effortlessly. It's a superb performance by black. So let's just see how this all works out. Okay, this is an opening called the Caro-Kann. In general, it's a very solid way for black to play. This is the Capablanca variation. We see a certain amount of harmony in the black camp. Black probably intends to follow up with e6, and then the bishop on c8 is conveniently outside the pawn chain. On top of that, the knight on e4 is attacked. Black is hoping to push that knight out of the centre to a less influential post. Anand's happy to retreat his bishop, having achieved his objective. And now white plays pawn up to h4, the first sign of aggressive intent. Black saves his bishop with h6. White plays knight f3, and once again white is thinking about playing knight e5. Black would be ill-advised to allow that move. For instance, after e6, knight e5, bishop h7, white can perhaps move in with queen h5, and this is a slightly awkward move for black to meet comfortably. He certainly doesn't want to play g6 in this position, and then if he plays queen c7, he runs into moves like bishop f4. You don't really want to be here with black. This is not why you play the Caro-Kann, to get into a defensive situation like this. Fortunately, black can repel the initial assault with the simple move knight d7, and well, white doesn't really have any further justification for playing knight e5, so he has to continue with other moves. He plays h5, bishop h7, and now the bishop comes out to d3, after which black is happy to take and push his pawn up to e6. Bishop d2. Okay, now using the attacking yardsticks we discussed earlier, white has 4 pieces out to black's 1. So shouldn't white be thinking in terms of some sort of outright attack? Okay, well black would argue, yes, that might be the case, but where are my weaknesses? We've already said that unless the enemy has noticeable weaknesses in his camp, it's illogical to suppose that you can just start an attack just like that. And the fact is, black doesn't have any weaknesses. Anand's next move, knight gf6, proposes to catch up in development, and he says, okay, you try and attack me. I don't mind. You can castle. I'm just going to go bishop e7, and with no weaknesses, you're going to find it very difficult to actually develop any sort of meaningful pressure in this position. And practice has confirmed this assessment. With bishop e7, black's keeping his position flexible. We don't know quite yet where Anand's going to put his king. He could castle queenside, he could castle kingside, according to circumstances. He's waiting to see. Furthermore, that pawn on h5, is it strong or weak? White would argue that it's restricting, limiting black's options on the king side. For instance, it's already freezing these pawns. But as we'll see, that pawn could easily become a liability. So it's not quite clear whether that pawn isn't a weakness which black can fasten onto and maybe attack and win the longer the game goes on. Essentially, in this type of position, black has no weaknesses, but he lacks space. So he's got to be very patient. He's got to play slowly, carefully, not make things worse, and await his chances. Meanwhile, white has got to go somewhere with his position. And Gashimov tries to do that by massing his pieces in the centre with rook he1. It looks as though white's building up to some sort of nice attack here. And, well, black has to be careful. At any rate, Anand plays castle, a move which looks risky in view of white's next, well, very vigorous move, knight f5. But the funny thing is, black's position can withstand this initial attack, and I have no doubt at all this position has been on Vishy Anand's board before the game was played. These guys know their openings to a fantastic degree. You know, they know them back to front. And there's no way the world champion would have allowed such a move if it was any good. So what we're about to see is a convincing refutation of this move, knight f5. But for the time being, it looks good for white. I mean, black takes. Okay, he's got double pawns now. Queen comes into e7. This does look strong. Queen comes to c7. And now d takes e5, opening up the game for white's supposedly better placed pieces. And the point of this move is that after queen takes c5, white will probably take the queens off and then go rook e5, forking the knight and the pawn. So everything's looking good for white in this position. But what Gashimov has underestimated is black's ability to create counterplay in this position. And looking around, as long as black can find a good move in this precise position, the signs are good that he can create counterplay. For instance, firstly, what about that pawn on h5? It's unprotected. Secondly, there's a pawn on f2 there, which is unprotected, and so is the pawn on g2. If black could somehow diffuse white's initial attack, then he could perhaps think about attacking white's kingside. Well, Anand fulfills all his obligations with rook fe8. This is an excellent move, and well, quite takes away the possibility from white of rook e5 a bit later on. So counterplay is enabled with this move. Now black can play queen takes c5 in peace. Off come the queens, and white's got to organise his play a bit differently now. Suddenly he's got to worry about that pawn on h5. Gashimov decides to continue the pressure with knight d4. But Anand moves in with knight ce4. Another move creating counterplay. He's not just going to sit and take it. After knight takes f5, he's going knight takes f2. And as you can see, black now has counterplay all over the position. On h5 and d1 for starters. In fact, white's next move is completely forced. The rook on d1 is entombed. White's got to take on e8. And now after rook takes e8, black has yet more counterplay based on his command of the open file. Rook f1 was played. Knight 2 to e4. Very strong knights. Rook e1. And now knight takes h5. And I think we can safely say that not only are the initial white attack repelled, it's now black who is going on to take over the position. In fact, black has won a pawn. And, you know, against Anand, you better have some compensation for the pawn. Or else you're going to just have to suffer a slow and painful defeat against this guy's fantastic technique? Well, with bishop c3, white says, I'm afraid I don't see any compensation for the pawn. Black covers everything with knight f6. White goes bishop d4, attacking a7. Black's easily able to protect that pawn. And white plays rook e3. Rook e6, excellent defence, covering the third rank. No counterplay for white anymore. And, well, black has completely repelled the initial assault and now really should go on to win this game without too much bother, because black still has no weaknesses in his camp. White's trying to create some weaknesses. White's looking around, he's looking for positive points to make his life easier. Well, he's got 3 pawns to 2 on the queen side, so he can create a passed pawn there by pushing his pawns. It turns out not to be enough. Knight e8, rook b3, knight d6, uncovering the rook, protecting b7, attacking f5. Several things with one move. Knight e3, and now f5. And this is the start, really, of the winning idea. Whereas white had a majority on the queen side, black has a more than potent majority on the king side. And once those pawns start rolling towards the white pieces, the pieces are going to be driven back, and black is going to win this game fairly comfortably. And as it turns out, that's exactly what comes to pass. Both players organise their pieces to the best possible extent, but in the end, white has no defence against the advancing kingside pawns. King b2 is to the best possible extent, but in the end, white has no defence against the advancing kingside pawns. King b2, h5, there really is no defence to black's pawn avalanche. Behind the pawns, the pieces can be massed and improved to an even greater degree. Black is moving in for the kill. I did mention earlier that the pawn on g2 could become weak. Well, now we see it coming to pass about 20 moves later. Bishop comes to f2. Gashimov is getting desperate. Knight takes g2. Knight f3. King at f6, easily defending. There's a token check. Up comes the king. Rook goes across to h6. Knight e3. Well, that move sets up a winning fork with knight d1 check. Bishop e1. Knight f6 defending h5. Rook h8. Of course, this is completely lost for white. g4. Knight h4 check. And now king g5. And finally white decided to throw in the towel. Okay, well, that was a terrific example of technique from Vishy Anand. White's attack was beaten back, but it was beaten back because black had counterplay. And that is the main lesson we learn from this game. Counterplay is the essence of defence. Without it, you are doomed to suffer. In the end, in this game, the tables were turned. It was white who started out as the attacker, in the end ended up as the defender, and as you can see, for the past 15 to 20 moves, he's been suffering without any counterplay at all, and as a result, Anand just stepped in and took the point in an effortless and world champion-like fashion.